She came down the stairs barefoot, holding two swimsuits, one red, one the kind that looks like it's made of dental floss, and asked which made her look more like she's over him. I didn't ask who him was. Dana stood in front of the mirror, twisting at the hip like she was auditioning for someone who wasn't me. Eli's name hadn't come up for months. Not since that wine-fueled dinner party where he called me reliable, like a Volvo. Dana had laughed so hard she spilled her Pinot on the rug I paid to clean. Now here she was again, brushing on that same shade of lipstick she wore when we first met, only slower, more deliberate. Her voice floated over her shoulder like a feather dipped in acid. Don't wait up too late while I'm gone. You've got your crossword puzzles and oatmeal, right? I didn't blink. I just folded the paper I wasn't reading and set it clean, emotionless, like reading a weather report. If you go on that trip with him, I'm out. She froze for a second, not long, just long enough for her reflection to catch up with her ego. Then she turned around, that little smirk already crawling up the corner of her mouth. Oh, please, Marcus. You're not the dramatic type. I nodded. Exactly. She didn't understand, probably thought I was posturing, one of those empty threats men make when they're cornered by their own silence. But she forgot the one thing I never stopped being, patient. Dana thought my stillness was weakness. She never realized it was containment. She twirled her hair again, like she always did when she wanted to dismiss something without looking like she cared. I need a break from all of this. I need to breathe. You don't want me resenting you, do you? I looked at her for what felt like the first time in years. Not the curated version she posted on Instagram. Not the woman I walked down an aisle with. The real Dana. Veins just under the surface. A little twitch in her cheek when she was bluffing. That fake lightness in her voice when she was buying time. You already resent me, I said. But you won't after this. She laughed, louder than necessary. You going to divorce me because I'm going to a beach with an old friend? No. I'm going to walk away. You can keep calling it friendship. Just don't expect me to keep calling this a marriage. She shook her head, grabbing her phone off the counter and pretending to text someone, probably Eli. Probably sending a message like, "Guess what Grandpa just said?" I didn't care. Not anymore. I had rehearsed that line for 6 months. Practiced it on drives to the grocery store. Whispered it while shaving. If you go, I'm out. Not yelled. Not pleaded. Not sobbed. Just delivered. The power wasn't in the threat. It was in the absence of negotiation. And maybe that's what startled her, the stillness, the absence of begging, the way I didn't follow her up the stairs or ask what time her flight was. I just went to the kitchen, made myself a coffee, and watched the steam rise like I was witnessing a cremation. Quiet. Controlled. Final. That night she packed fast. She blasted music in the bedroom like a teenager trying to rewrite the mood. Eli says it's going to rain, she yelled, half laughing. Guess I'll have to wear less. I didn't answer. I wasn't in the mood to compete with ghost laughter from a man who thought my quiet made me invisible. Eli wouldn't recognize a storm until it pulled his roof off. The next morning, she walked past me in her airport athleisure, dragging a pink roller bag I bought her for our anniversary 2 years ago. She stopped at the door like she wanted me to stop her. Instead, I reached into my back pocket, pulled out a folded slip of paper, and placed it gently on the counter. She didn't even look at it, just scoffed. I'll text you when I land. I didn't nod, didn't blink. I just looked her in the eye and said, no need. The front door clicked shut behind her like the last sentence of a book neither of us were brave enough to finish. She didn't look back, just tossed me a half smile over her shoulder like we were still playing house. Like this was just another round of her. The kind of smile that says, you'll be here when I get back. Because you always are. She didn't notice I hadn't made coffee, that the crossword wasn't open, that I wasn't even sitting. I was waiting. As her Uber purred away from the curb, I stood motionless by the window, watched her disappear into someone else's weekend. She looked like freedom. Aviators. Yoga pants. Earbuds in. Already curating her first photo caption. Probably something self-congratulatory. Sip in peace or reset mode on. Something rehearsed. Once the taillights vanished, I walked to my study. Second drawer, left side. Beneath the useless warranties and old insurance policies, the envelope was still there. Still sealed. Plan D printed in block letters across the front. Not Plan A. That was marriage. Plan B had died in couples therapy when Dana said, "I just don't think emotional loyalty is sustainable." Plan C had been silence. Now we were here. Plan D wasn't a tantrum. It was an architecture. Layers of documents. Contingencies. Timing protocols. Not to punish her, but to uncouple efficiently. Quietly. Strategically. The envelope contained the full trust restructure, finalized months ago but not yet filed. A quick claim deed transfer for the beach house she never asked about. A new lease agreement, pre-signed by a tenant I had vetted for over a year. A letter addressed to Clark and Wynn law offices with only one line underlined. Initiate effective immediately. I took it out, smoothed it on the desk, looked at my hands, steady, no tremor, not even a flutter in my chest. Then I picked up the phone. First call went to Gregory. It rang 6 times before he answered with the usual dry tone that said he was mid-chess match or divorce court. Same energy. Proceed, I said. He paused. Today? She's airborne. Click. That was it. No explanation needed. The man's retainer had been quietly bleeding my account for over a year in preparation for this exact call. No billable hours wasted on pep talks. Second call, Rachel, my niece, our only regular house guest. Dana barely tolerated her, always calling her quiet and a little judgy. Why? Because Rachel actually noticed things. Like which side of the bed Dana started sleeping on. When she stopped touching me. Like the 6 new outfits Dana bought after bumping into Eli at that dumb art gala. Is it time? Rachel asked. I smiled. The first real one in weeks. Yeah. You good to meet Anna? Already on the way. He's where you said they'd be, in the kitchen, hooked by the stove. All right. I'll stay until she's settled. We hung up. I returned to the envelope. Slid it into the FedEx packet already addressed and prepaid. Walked it to the door. No drama. Just logistics. As I sealed the flap, I caught a glimpse of Dana's handwriting on a post-it near the fridge. Pick up almond milk, smiley face, with a heart she'd drawn too perfectly, like it was part of a brand campaign. I didn't remove it. Let the heart sit there like an artifact. The last relic of a woman who believed I'd never move. Never act. Never leave. Because I didn't shout. Because I didn't throw plates or scroll through her phone at 2 a.m. But while she was sipping cocktails with Eli, letting him put sunscreen on her back like it meant nothing, I was sending the final paperwork of a life she no longer belonged to. She packed for the beach. I packed her exit. 3 days. No calls. No texts. No fake, just checking in messages from Dana. Not even one of those passive-aggressive selfies women send when they want to look like they're glowing, without asking if you're looking. Instead, it came from my sister. Text message. No greeting. No emojis. Just, "You okay?" Attached was the photo. At first glance, it was what you'd expect from a woman in fresh rebellion. Dana, in a neon bikini, holding a plastic pineapple cup. Half turned toward the camera, half twisted towards someone just out of frame. Her hip popped like she was modeling for people she wanted to regret her. But it wasn't the pose that caught me. Not the drink. Not even Eli behind her, shirtless, leaning in with that same smug half-grin he wore the night he called me dependable, like airport Wi-Fi. No. It was the caption. Cheers to never settling. I didn't react right away. My sister probably expected anger, shock, some emoji barrage of emotional wounds. Instead, I stared at it like a puzzle. Let the silence stretch around me. Then I tilted my head and zoomed in. Her sunglasses. Mirrored aviators. Bright. Obnoxious. The kind influencers wear to hide how empty their eyes are. And in that reflection, barely visible, a table. Not a poolside lounge table. No umbrella. No beach towels. It was a restaurant. White linen. Candles. 2 wine glasses. And a man's hand resting on hers. Not Eli's. The watch on his wrist was different. Silver face. Black band. Eli wore that gaudy smart watch with a cracked screen. The one he kept tapping like it owed him money. This man's hand was older. Tanned. Confident posture. And her fingers weren't just resting. They were curled toward his palm. I pinched and zoomed until the pixels gave way. There, in the corner of the table, a bottle of Chateau Margaux. $600 a pop. Dana doesn't drink red. So this wasn't just a beach brunch with Eli, the safe friend. This was a dinner. A real one. Intimate. Candlelit. With someone who wasn't supposed to exist. A third party to her alibi. And she had posted it like a trophy, never realizing that arrogance turns every detail into evidence. I set the phone down. No anger. Just detachment. She thought the bikini would hurt me. She thought the caption would sting. She thought Eli was the poison. But Eli was a distraction. The real betrayal was always her pride. The part of her that wanted to be seen winning, even if she had to manufacture the scoreboard. My phone buzzed again. Rachel this time. Short message. Anna settled in. Curtains up. Keys duplicated. You're good. I texted back one word. Perfect. Then I returned to the photo. This time, not to inspect her, but to appreciate it for what it was. A snapshot of someone who had just given me full permission. She wanted to burn the bridge? Fine. She just forgot I built the whole damn town around it. The apartment was never supposed to matter. We bought it 7 years ago, back when Dana still talked about investing in something low risk. She called it her bored housewife fund. Said it gave her something to brag about during brunch without needing to actually lift a finger. But after the paperwork was signed, she never set foot in it again. Not once. Never asked about tenants. Never saw the new floors I had installed. Never noticed when the mortgage was quietly paid off. She had no idea that by the time she was posing in pool chairs with men who weren't her husband, this place had already become something else entirely. An exit strategy. I pulled into the back alley behind the unit. Clean. Quiet. Discreet. The kind of place no one posts on Instagram, but everyone remembers when life turns sideways. The windows were spotless. The new curtains drawn. No damage to repair. No memories to erase. Just blank walls and fresh paint. A clean slate. A stage. Anna was already there. She stood by the door, dressed in tailored slacks, a cream sweater, and a scarf tied like she meant business, but didn't need to prove it. She didn't look rushed or curious. She looked like someone who had lived through enough nonsense to know better than to ask too many questions. Marcus, she said. I nodded and handed her the keys. She didn't fumble or pretend to be surprised. Just slid them onto her ring with a soft clink, like she'd already lived here in her mind a dozen times. I've left the lease agreement on the counter, I said. Initials on the last page. Signature at the bottom. She followed me in. Everything inside was ready. The living room was staged subtly. Nothing flashy. A coffee table with a hardcover book about landscapes. A single orchid by the window. The kind of apartment that looked lived in without ever really feeling like home. The kind people drive past and never wonder about. Perfect. Anna walked through each room silently. She wasn't trying to be polite. She was measuring, testing the echo, checking the angles. When she returned to the living room, she picked up the pen and signed. Do you want a deposit? She asked. No, I replied. The rent's token. The lease is binding. That's what matters. She gave me a curious look, but didn't press. That's why I chose her. Anna came recommended by someone who understood discretion. She had no criminal record, no messy history, no ties to Dana's world. A former real estate executive who'd walked away from her last firm the moment it went public. Retired early. Widowed. No kids. Like quiet things. I walked her to the door. Before she stepped out, I said, "It's yours now. Just don't mention me to anyone." She smiled. Not warm, not cold, just enough to say, "Understood." Silent as Sunday, she replied. The door closed softly behind her. No click. No drama. Back in my car, I opened the glove box. Took out a small envelope. Inside were 3 photos. One of Dana on the beach. One of the sunglasses reflection. And one of Eli standing too close with his hand on her hip at some tacky pool bar. None of them angry. None even overly sexual. Just careless. I placed the envelope in the center console. Not as evidence. As a reminder. This wasn't revenge. This was alignment. Dana had chosen the stage. I just made sure the audience was watching the right act. And Anna? She was the first cue. The moment her plane touched down, Dana's fingers were already moving. Landed. Wanna grab dinner. Sent with a sunglasses emoji and a winking face. Her usual cocktail of fake chill and anticipation. She probably thought I'd fold the second she came back, like I'd been pacing the living room in robe and slippers, whispering her name into an empty wine glass. She waited 5 minutes, then 10. Still no reply. Tried calling. Straight to voicemail. Her lips curled slightly. "He's pouting," she muttered, already scrolling Instagram for something to distract herself. Maybe she thought I'd come pick her up, that I'd be there at arrivals with some placating smile, ready to say, "Let's talk about this like adults." That's how she rewrote our arguments, like they were always just misunderstandings that got too emotional. But as she slid into the back of a rideshare with her overstuffed pink roller bag, reality didn't hit her. Not yet. She passed the bookstore we used to visit. Still no reality check. She turned onto our street. Still nothing. Even when the driver paused outside our front gate, she didn't feel it yet. Not when she reached for her keys. Not when she smiled at her reflection in the window, assuming the world was still arranged in the same shape she left it. It hit when the key didn't turn. She jiggled the lock. Once. Twice. Then shoved harder like the house was playing games. The door didn't budge. Her face twisted. First, annoyance. Not fear. Not yet. She stepped back and tried the garage keypad. Hit the numbers 0-9-8-3. Familiar tones. Denied. Again. Denied. She stared at the keypad like it owed her an explanation. Fumbled through her purse. Pulled out her phone and called me. Straight to voicemail. "Marcus, seriously," she said into the air, pacing in front of her own house like a stranger. "This isn't funny." Redial. Nothing. For the next 30 minutes, she made a circuit around the front porch like a woman in denial. Checking under mats. Tapping windows. Peering in like she might see her reflection behaving better. Her frustration morphed into quiet panic. But it was still masked under entitlement. That's when she tried Rachel. It rang twice. Rachel picked up. Cool. Dry. Familiar enough to be polite. Distant enough to be noticed. "Rachel." Dana exhaled. "Thank God. I can't get in the house. Did Marcus say anything to you? Like, is he just trying to make a point?" A pause. "You should talk to the new tenant." Dana blinked. "What?" "I'm not supposed to say much. But if you want to get inside that house, you'll need her permission." Dana scoffed. "Her? Who the hell is her?" Another pause. "You'll see." Click. The silence after that wasn't just quiet. It was active, loud in its absence. Dana stared at the phone like it had betrayed her. The front yard. The shutters. The porch swing. It all looked the same, but something underneath had shifted. A layer she didn't know existed had slid away. She tried peeking through the living room window. Curtains. New ones. Not the beige linen she had picked out during her modern farmhouse phase. These were heavier. Ivory. Neatly pressed. elegant, nothing Dana would have chosen, and that alone told her more than she wanted to know. The doorbell was now her only option, and even that felt foreign, like she was pressing it at someone else's house. So she did, twice, then 3 times, and waited. No footsteps, no familiar creak on the floorboards, just a single flicker of movement behind the curtain. A shadow, a shape, a presence. She stepped back instinctively. Her stomach flipped, and for the first time since that bikini photo, Dana realized she hadn't just pushed a boundary. She'd been erased from it. Dana showed up at her sister's place still pretending nothing was wrong. "I think Marcus changed the locks to teach me a lesson," she said, dropping her designer bag by the entryway like a teenager home from college. "He's being petty. Classic overcorrection. He'll cool off." Her sister, Mia, didn't say much, just nodded and handed her a stack of forwarded mail. Dana flipped through it like it was junk. Department store catalogs, a credit card offer, then one thick envelope, marked private and confidential. The return address, Clark and Wynn Law offices. Her fingers hesitated. It wasn't panic. Not yet. Just a twinge of curiosity edged with something more brittle. Marcus never used lawyers casually. He was the kind of man who thought legal action was for people who couldn't plan. And Clark and Wynn, that was the firm he'd referenced once when we were doing estate paperwork. She remembered the name only because she joked it sounded like an overpriced watch brand. She sat on the couch and tore it open. Inside, a 5-page letter. Heavy paper. The kind with a watermark. Real money paper. She scanned the first few lines, her eyes stumbling over the sterile legal tone like they were tripping on marble. "Dear Mrs. Lockhatch, pursuant to the restructuring of the Locke Family Property Trust, this notice serves to inform you that effective immediately the lease agreement associated with the residential property at 42 Wisteria Lane has been terminated." Her eyes kept moving, but slower now. "In accordance with the stipulations agreed upon in the original trust, which was filed under a non-marital status clause, all property and rights retained therein shall revert exclusively to the sole trustee, Marcus J. Lockhatch." She sat up straighter. "All rights revoked. Due to non-marital trust restructuring." Dated 1 week before her trip. Her mouth parted. Silent, for the first time in weeks. Maybe months. Her thoughts outran her ego. She flipped to the next page. A full property transfer deed. Not pending. Filed. Not proposed. Executed. Witnessed. Notarized. Third page, an itemized inventory list. Everything she had assumed still belonged to her. The house. The second apartment she never asked about. The shared bank account. Reassigned. A postmarital clause she'd signed years ago without reading closely, thinking it was just something their accountant needed in case of estate taxes. Clause 7b. Trustee reserves the right to restructure holdings upon evidence of extramarital affiliation, breach of fiduciary confidence, or abandonment of residence for more than 48 hours without notice. She dropped the packet like it had burned her. Abandonment. 48 hours. She'd been gone 6 days. Her phone was already in her hand before she realized she didn't know who she was dialing for. Marcus wouldn't pick up. Rachel wouldn't say more. Her sister was pretending to fold laundry in the next room, but Dana could feel the judgment vibrating through the walls. She scrolled back to her own Instagram post. The bikini one. The caption, "Cheers to never settling." Now it read like a suicide note in disguise. The room spun slightly. Dana stood up too fast and caught herself on the edge of the couch. Her heart was pounding, not from rage, not from betrayal, but from something worse. Certainty. She hadn't been punished. She'd been replaced. And it wasn't dramatic. It was surgical. Dana didn't plan the drive. It wasn't strategic. It wasn't even rational. It was something more feral, instinctive, driven not by hope, but by desperation masquerading as purpose. She needed to see something, anything, that might offer proof this wasn't real, that this was temporary, that Marcus was bluffing harder than she had. The street hadn't changed. Not a bit. That was what unnerved her the most. The neighbors' cars still lined the curb like clockwork. The old oak trees still dropped leaves across their driveway in passive rebellion against her manicured order. Even the porch lights on the McCullen house still flickered like a broken promise. It all looked exactly the same. Too much so. Dana parked a few houses down, not out of caution, but out of a quiet shame she hadn't yet named. Somewhere deep in her chest, she knew she wasn't arriving home. She was approaching something altered, reshaped, perhaps even erased. From the driver's seat, she stared at the house for a full minute, willing it to revert, to correct itself, to forgive her somehow. And then she saw it. Movement. Subtle, deliberate. The curtain in the front window shifted, not pulled open in welcome, but tilted slightly. Just enough to signal the presence of someone inside. Someone watching. Someone measuring. And then she saw her. The face, mid-50s, poised, composed, elegant in that effortless, aggravating way Dana used to fake but never truly mastered. The woman stood framed by the window like a painting hung with intention. Her blouse was pale, her hair pulled back in a style that whispered confidence without courting attention. Elegant, not flashy, not provocative, not performative. Elegant. The word stung more than it should have. Dana felt it slap across her pride. Her hands moved faster than her mind. The car door flung open with too much force. Her heels clicked against the pavement like gavel strikes as she strode toward the front steps, each breath shallow and defiant, each thought rehearsing an indignant line that would put this entire charade back under her control. Before she could knock, the door opened. Not in panic, not in haste, simply opened. And there stood the woman, Anna, not smug, not apologetic, just there, like she belonged, like she had been living in this house for years instead of mere days. "Can I help you?" Her voice was measured, polished, bearing the faintest edge of curiosity, the kind you reserve for lost tourists or unexpected guests at the wrong address. Dana blinked. Her mental script evaporated into useless vapor. "That's my house." Anna tilted her head slightly, as though Dana were a painting she was considering, something unfinished, perhaps unsellable. Then she smiled, not with triumph, not with pity, with precision. Was. One word. No venom, no sarcasm, just precision. Dana's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. She glanced over Anna's shoulder, searching the hallway for something familiar, something she could claim. The rug was gone. The coat rack was gone. Even the mirror from that boutique in Denver was gone. In its place hung a single canvas print of a mountain lake, crisp and neutral, untouched by memory. Anna didn't move, didn't invite her in, didn't even offer her the threshold. Dana's voice returned, brittle and fraying. "Marcus." He didn't say anything. He can't just. Anna nodded once, slowly, with the patience of someone who had already anticipated every word. "Everything's filed. Notarized. I have the lease. Would you like to see it?" Dana's lips twitched. "I don't need to see anything." Anna shrugged. A soft, professional dismissal. "Suit yourself." And just like that, she closed the door. Not with a slam, not with a flourish. Like she was sealing off the past. Dana stood there, fists clenched, jaw tight, eyes burning. She wasn't just locked out, she was replaced. And not by someone younger, not by someone flashier, but by someone who didn't even need to try. No affair, no drama, no cheap soap opera twist. Just a razor. Quiet, elegant, complete. Dana picked the restaurant carefully. It wasn't one of the trendy downtown rooftop joints with velvet banquettes and cocktails that looked like science experiments. It was calculated nostalgia, a quiet Italian place they used to frequent back when things felt grounded. White tablecloths, heavy silverware, real candles, the kind of place that whispered reconciliation. She booked the table for 6, even included his sister and Rachel, as if the gesture itself could send a signal. I'm still your wife. I still wear the last name. As if a table reservation and overpriced red sauce could rebuild what she bulldozed with a caption and a bikini. Still, she dressed like she was going to win something. Soft curls. Diamond studs from their 10th anniversary. A muted silk dress that said, I'm stable. I'm mature. I'm ready to talk. Not the beach glam Dana that Eli encouraged. This was the Marcus version, the one she thought he missed. When she arrived, the hostess smiled and led her to the corner booth with 6 chairs and too much optimism. 15 minutes passed. Just nerves, she told herself. She checked her phone 3 times. No new messages. She sent Rachel a text. Running late. No reply. 30 minutes. She called Marcus. Straight to voicemail. The waiter hovered nearby, pity softening his posture. Would you like to order a drink? Not yet, Dana whispered, swallowing her humiliation. Just waiting on a few. He nodded and retreated. She looked around the restaurant. No familiar faces. No one walking in. Just strangers laughing at their own inside jokes while her night quietly collapsed. 45 minutes. The waiter returned. This time, he wasn't empty-handed. He placed a chilled bottle of Italian red wine on the table, her favorite. The one she and Marcus used to share after long arguments, when the silence became a truce. Dana blinked. I didn't order that. The waiter smiled politely and handed her a small, cream-colored envelope. Heavy paper. Sharp fold. Classy. She opened it with a trembling finger. Inside, a single line. Congratulations on starting over, a former tenant. Her breath caught. She looked at the wine label. A vintage from the year they bought the house. The one Marcus had hunted down for months, saying, if we're going to age together, might as well drink something that knows how. The waiter lingered. It was dropped off earlier today with instructions to deliver at the 1-hour mark. You're free to keep the table as long as you like. Dana nodded, her throat dry. Thanks. As he walked away, a couple at the next table whispered. She knew they recognized the dress, the silence, the empty chairs. It was all too loud. She sat there for another 10 minutes. No one came. Not Marcus. Not Rachel. Not even Mia. She poured herself a glass of wine. It tasted like ash. Not because it was bad. Because it was chosen without her. Tailored to her taste. Delivered on cue. Wrapped in the kind of message that made her realize something she had never imagined. She wasn't being punished. She was being dismissed. With style. With timing. With the kind of cruelty that wears silk gloves. The wine sat unopened on the kitchen counter of her sister's guest house, still in its silk-lined bag, still looking smug in that quiet, curated way that only carefully chosen things can. Dana hadn't touched it since the dinner. Couldn't. Wouldn't. It looked like it was still smirking at her, taunting her, whispering reminders of a world she no longer had access to. It was now 2:43 a.m., and she sat curled on a couch that wasn't hers, wrapped in a robe that wasn't hers, in a house that didn't carry her scent or story. The glow from her phone was the only light in the room, casting thin blue shadows across unfamiliar walls. Everything around her was temporary, furniture that didn't creak with memory, rugs that held no stains, and silence that didn't echo her past. She scrolled with trembling fingers. Eli's Instagram. Nothing. Well, not nothing. Just nothing of her. No photos. No tags. No cheeky captions. No sun-bleached grins with peace signs thrown into the ocean air like confetti. Not even a blurry side shot. Instead, there was her. Not Dana. Her. Some brunette in a black one-piece with legs for days and a smile that wasn't annoying, just annoyingly natural. She was tagged at a rooftop bar in Cabo, holding the same pineapple cocktail Dana had posed with 3 days earlier, except this one looked effortless. Relaxed. Real. The caption read, "Some people get better with every flight. Smirking face. Airplane emoji. Tropical drink. Dana zoomed in. Eli's arm was around the brunette's waist. Not casually. Not playfully. Possessively. Secure. Public. Her stomach turned with a twist that was part betrayal, part humiliation, and mostly a realization too late to reverse. She backed out. Checked the date. 8 hours ago. They were still there. Together. While Dana was sitting in borrowed silence, with a guest towel draped over her legs and an inbox full of absence. She fired off a text to Eli. Seriously, WTF is that? No reply. She waited 30 seconds. A minute. 3. Typed another. Was any of that real, or was I just your placeholder? Still nothing. She opened her photo gallery. Scrolled through the vacation pictures. Each one more performative than the last. Dana in sunglasses. Dana by the pool. Dana with the caption she thought would sting. Cheers to never settling. Now, those words echoed like a taunt from her own reflection. She whispered them out loud, trying to mimic the confident lilt she had used when typing them. Mocked her own voice. Tried to laugh. Couldn't. Because settling would have meant staying with the man who made coffee without being asked. The man who always parked her car facing outward so she wouldn't have to reverse. The man who remembered her mother's birthday even when she didn't. Marcus wasn't the punishment. He was the shelter she burned down just to feel wanted. And Eli was a vacation. She tapped back to the photo of the wine. The envelope beside it. That single line. Congratulations on starting over, a former tenant. She never realized how cold those words were until now. Not because they were cruel, but because they were precise. Final. She looked around the room. No framed photos, no flowers, no warmth. Her sister's guest space was clean, but sterile. Meant for visitors. Meant for things that pass through. Dana had become just that. An overnight guest in every chapter of her own life. She checked her phone again. Still nothing from Eli. Still no reply from Marcus. Just a blank screen. And her own caption frozen in the feed. Life's too short to settle. She whispered it again, softer this time, as if mouthing it could take the weight off its meaning. Then let the silence answer. Because nothing answers louder than being forgotten. The air that morning felt heavier than any seasonal shift could explain, more than humidity, more than impending weather. It was the weight of finality settling in slowly, like dust finding untouched corners of an abandoned home. And Dana felt it before she even left the guest house, before she slipped into jeans and a sweater, chosen not for style or approval but for function, for emotional armor, for the task of witnessing what she feared had already taken root. She hadn't eaten, hadn't showered, hadn't spoken a word since the silence responded louder than Marcus ever had to anything she'd said in the last 6 months, and now every step toward her car felt less like a march of confrontation and more like the slow, reluctant pace of someone preparing to attend the autopsy of something they once called home. She didn't park out front this time, not for drama or distance, but because shame has its own navigation system, and when she turned off the engine, she stayed seated for several long minutes, hands resting on the wheel as if she needed to ground herself in something familiar, in something she could still control, even as every glance at the house reminded her that the structure had outgrown her entirely. The front gate was open, the garden somehow blooming more vibrantly than it ever had under her care, with hedges trimmed neatly and flowers she couldn't name opening as if to greet someone else entirely, and it struck her then, not as coincidence, but as cruel choreography, that life had not simply moved on without her, it had flourished in her absence. And then she saw them. Anna, kneeling in the flower bed, dirt on her gloves, her straw hat tilted just enough to shield her face while still letting the sun warm her jawline. And Marcus, beside her, not touching, not hovering, just standing with a watering can in hand like it had always belonged there, like it was his daily ritual and not some performative act for an audience. They weren't speaking, weren't laughing loudly or posing like couples do when they want to prove something to someone who isn't there. They were simply synced, quiet, unforced, and Dana felt something inside her begin to fracture not from betrayal but from clarity. She called out before she reached them, her voice cracking mid-sentence, carrying more accusation than question, more plea than purpose. "You moved her in?" Marcus looked up slowly, his gaze not sharp or cold but resolved, the same expression he used when checking a receipt or adjusting the thermostat, measured, finished. "She signed a lease," he said after a pause, one that lasted just long enough to let her consider the implications but not long enough to offer her space to interrupt. "Same way you signed off your place in my life." She stumbled slightly, not from physical weakness, but from the dizzying realization that this wasn't retaliation, it was execution, and not the public kind with shouting and slamming doors, but the private, clinical kind that leaves no witnesses. Only documents and silence. "You planned this," she said, her voice a shade too loud, a breath too shallow, the fight trying to catch up to the defeat. He turned his eyes back to the garden, never lifting them from the soil as he replied, "No, I prepared." 3 words. And just like that, it all collapsed, not in fire, not in fury, but in distance. Anna stood then, brushing dirt from her knees, not with haste or apology, but with the quiet dignity of someone who knows the full history of a space and has no need to argue her right to remain within it. She looked at Dana, not with pity, not with triumph, but with something more unsettling, restraint, as if she could see the ghost of a marriage still flickering in Dana's outline but chose not to acknowledge it, as if granting Dana that recognition would be more cruel than withholding it. Dana wanted to scream, to accuse, to say something unforgettable, something that would crack the tableau of calm surrounding them, but the only thing that came out was a whisper, so small it barely survived the wind. "She's boring." Marcus didn't even turn his head fully, just shifted enough to meet her gaze, and when he spoke, his voice didn't rise, didn't spike with insult or defense, it remained level, like a verdict finally spoken. "You said that once," he answered, "right before I realized boring stays." Then he turned back, not just physically but spiritually, closing the last page of a book that Dana hadn't realized he'd finished reading months ago. And as he knelt beside Anna to help tend the garden, her garden, now Dana stood frozen, her presence shrinking by the second in a place that no longer recognized her name. Not lost, erased.